What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
Would you say Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
What's up, Rebels? Welcome back to Rebel Radio, the weekly show where I talk to the rebels who are shaping youth culture. We find out how they do it, why they do it, and what you can do to get a little piece of the pie for yourself. This week I get into it with DJ Morse Code. He's been called the best DJ in America. He's one half of the group Pools with the Mike B, making some sexy house music. We get into some details from his journey from San Francisco to LA and differences in the music scene in those two cities. He also helps me kind of break down what makes a great DJ. Some good stories coming up from DJ Morse Code right after our EDM.com track of the week. Did you know Rebel Radio is the only show that brings you new music every week from EDM.com? This week was Willem with Emotion. That's on the Your Secret label. Get over to SoundCloud. Look for Your Secret if you want to hear more new music just like that. And right now we'll get into it with DJ Morse Code.
I didn't know you were from San Francisco.
Yeah, I came, I've been here since '89. Came for college and then stayed, but I don't know, we'll talk about it, but I have a kind of a love-hate relationship.
I mean, yeah, like me too.
Yeah.
I've been here 10 years now.
Have you?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm really glad I made that move.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed so much, and it's like, I don't know. Even then, I had a love-hate relationship with it, but now it's hard to feel like home when I go back.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been so long now, but it's still like I don't know. It definitely feels like there's moments where I'm like, oh, okay, now I remember. You know, it brings back a certain memory.
Right.
But it feels like a totally different city.
Yeah. I mean, I spent my early mid-20s there. Like, it's like, even in the 10 years I've been gone, so much has changed.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially the neighborhood I grew up in. I grew up on 23rd and Dolores.
Oh, okay. So I went to, I grew up on Hayes and Fillmore.
Okay. Oh, wow. Really changed over there, too.
Oh, it's totally different. Yeah. But I went to Everett.
Okay. I was down the street from me.
So it was over there. And then I went to McAteer. Mm-hmm. And so my sophomore year, somebody flooded the school on the weekend. And it when the water seeped into the building and messed up the asbestos. Oh. And so they had to pull out all the asbestos from the building. So we had to move to James Lick.
Oh, okay.
So I spent 2 years, we moved back my senior year. So I spent 2 years of high school at James Lick.
Wow, yeah,
which
was
was
right down the street from where I grew up.
Yeah. So it was a trip. I mean, it was cool in a way because I got to hang out in the Mission and we'd we'd jump in our cars and go to El Toro and get burritos for lunch. Mm-hmm. And be late coming back. But that was a trip.
They still got amazing burritos everywhere.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's that hasn't changed, thankfully.
I was home over the holidays and I was trying out some new joints.
Oh really?
Yeah, I got a steak and prawn burrito from Pancho Villa.
Nice.
Yeah, I kind of slept on it, to be honest. My top 3 are Farolito, Cancun, and La Taqueria.
Yeah.
It's pretty predictable.
Yeah.
But
no, I mean,
but
it's once I don't know. To me, once you find that, you kind of stop looking. You kind of stop exploring.
Yeah. You're I'm good.
Yeah, that's so funny. Well, thanks for doing this, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm excited to have you on. And
Absolutely. Lee told me great things. Spider, I hit up Spider. He told me great things.
Love Spider.
Yeah.
Turns out,
my dude.
so Spider's been on twice.
Yeah.
I met him here, actually. And it turns out we have the same birthday.
Oh, wow.
And we met our wives on the same day.
Wow.
So we have all these weird, like,
That's crazy.
connections that happens. And I saw you're the best DJ in America. So I want to find out what that's like. That's,
yeah, you know.
That's pretty
That's
crazy.
from a few years back.
That's pretty crazy distinction.
Yeah, I mean, it came out of nowhere, to be honest.
Yeah.
I literally, like, it was pretty funny. Like, one afternoon, I was literally, like, napping. And I woke up, and my phone was just, like, on fire. And I was like, what the hell? And because they did Best DJ in LA first. And
right.
then they did Best DJ in America after that.
Yeah.
But I was like, I found it ironic that I was like napping that day, like being totally unproductive.
Maybe that's what it takes.
And then I like wake up and my phone's like, congratulations. And I was like, I feel like I should be like working on music or like, you know, like getting my grind on.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
for sure. All right, well, we'll dig into that. And then
Cool.
I also know you produce with Brillstein.
yeah.
So he's been on the show and he DJ'd
Oh, really?
my wedding.
No way.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Damn, the connections just keep on coming.
Totally. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's like my dude.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he's like my best friend down
Love
here.
Mike B.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he lives like across the street from me. Like that was kind of the whole. Yeah, I mean, whatever we can talk about on
Oh,
the show,
right.
but that was how like pools came about.
Nice.
Yeah, I used to live over in this neighborhood, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, I lived in this like crazy house for about a year and a half that had like a pool in the backyard, and I met Mike probably like 2006 or so, right before I moved here. Some of the first like gigs I ever had in LA was like Cinespace Tuesday and like Banana Split Sunday.
Yeah.
And we met through AM, and we just hit it off like immediately. Like we just sort of had like we just sort of like identified, you know, within one another, kind of like skateboarding, like
Sure.
hip hop, you
Yeah.
know, all the classic things are like
Yeah,
same
yeah, yeah.
age. And then when I lived in that house, Mike started coming around that house a lot, and we were just swimming. And then we started like going to different pools, like kind of all over the city. And we were noticing that like we were kind of listening to like certain types of music
Right.
that were really complementary to like that vibe.
Yeah.
And then one day, then when I moved to Los Feliz, then one day I had the sampler, the SP404, just on at my house, like playing beats out of it. And Mike was like, what are you going to do with those? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, let's just go to the studio.
Nice.
And then we just started like making pools music.
So if we're at the pool,
Right.
what do you put it on?
Oh man, I should have brought my laptop or something so I could just pull up some names. But I mean, around that time there was kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to sound too esoteric explaining it, but there was like sort of a new wave of kind of down-tempo like music coming out that was like house and disco influenced, but also like hip hop influenced as well. And there were just new names popping up like Six Borough Project, Tornado Wallace, guys like that. And then on the hip hop side, you know, like the influence is so like Dilla, Madlib, like, which I've always been really into.
Sure.
And so it was kind of like this synergy of like combining all those things.
Yeah.
And I've also really record-wise, as far as like the older kind of records that I dig for, I'm like really into just jazz, but a lot of like fusion jazz and shit that like I felt like people were kind of sleeping on like back in the day that people want now.
Right.
And I'm just kind of like, yeah, I got it. And a lot of that just came from like, coming up in San Francisco, digging in San Francisco, learning, you know, how to dig like more efficiently from like people like Chris from the Groove Merchant and hanging out in that store a lot. And I had put out these mixes back in the thousands called fusion batches, which were kind of like specializing in that sound. And those mixes ended up having this weird kind of like cult following, like of, you know, people that they could care less about anything else I do.
Right?
But they're like, you know, like I still get weird like SoundCloud messages like, you know, what song comes on at like track, you know, like on the mix CD, like track 2, like 7 minutes and 34 seconds in. I'm like, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
And so that combined with the music that was coming out around that time, all those influences like combined to make pools. Because a lot of the samples I had in my sampler had come from like records like that, where I was just trying to flip little parts of them and listening to a lot of like MF Doom was another one too. How like I felt like was like the master of like, I call them drugstore breaks, where like the song itself is mad corny, but then there's one little part of it that's dope. Yeah. And you kind of flip it and make it like grimy and kind of like dope, like, you know that song Rhymes Like Dimes? Like, that's, to me, is a perfect example. Like, that track is like this sort of whatever Quincy Jones track. It sounds like literally, I call them drugstore breaks because it reminds me of like, like a Walgreens, but back in the day in San Francisco, it was like Thrifty Junior. Reminds me of like a Thrifty Junior, like, clean up on aisle 4, and like the music that's playing in the background. But then there's that one little part, and then he just kind of flipped it and made it sound dope. Sure. So I've just always been really into that. And so all those things combined to make pools. So,
let's go back to the beginning. How'd you first get, like, do you remember falling in love with music for the first time?
Yeah, well, it's probably like some of my earliest memories, really. It was just like staring into space, like listening to music, like before I could even walk. Like, my parents told me that, like, anytime they wanted me to just like be quiet, they just put on music. And I was just totally content.
What do you think they were playing?
Well, they played a lot of different stuff. Like when I was growing up, like my dad. I think my dad definitely like handed down the jazz like influence to me. But he was also playing like just all the classic Motown and stuff like Stevie Wonder and all that kind of stuff. He had reel-to-reels. Actually, he still has them.
Mine too.
At my folks' house. Like my dad had this reel-to-reel set up. Which was funny because later on when I started collecting records, I was like, man, he told me that back in the day he would take records and record them to reel, and then take the record back to the store and like get the exchange, and then exchange it for another record. And I was like, man, why didn't you just hang on to all these records? Because he had joints. But he would play stuff like a really like he was like ahead. And my dad really passed that down to me. Like he was really into like Sly and the Family Stone, and then my mom. She eventually went back to school and became a psychologist, but like when I was really little, she was just like an artist, like stay-at-home mom, and she was just like painting, sculpting, but then all the music she was listening to was like out there, like 80s, like artsy stuff like Talking Heads and Laurie Anderson, and like she was into that whole wave. Nice. So that combined with like, I don't know, I just feel like the kids' records, I can kind of remember they played for me around that time. I feel like were like funky, you know what I mean? It's kind of like later on when you're digging and you're like, there's like a whole like section of like people have sampled a lot of like kids' records from like the 70s and early 80s because there's like, they just sound like kind of vintage and dope and all of that combined with like literally just like I just remember in my neighborhood just cruising around as a kid and just hearing all kinds of music coming out of different cars and stuff. And then another really early memory is just like listening to KMEL in San Francisco and the like, wait, how are they doing that moment? Like the sort of like bing, like, light bulb moment was like hearing mix shows where there was no pauses in between the songs. Right. And even like, I remember, I don't know, I must have been like 6, 7 years old already thinking like, how are they doing that? You know? I want to know how to do that. So, like the city definitely, the San Francisco at that time really, influenced me a lot. Just
it's a weird thing to talk about with people that weren't there because, like, I think there are these moments. I mean, I was listening to Combat Jack on the way here, talking to Common, and they were talking about how New York in the 70s was this pressure cooker of economic, issues and social issues and music and all these things came together, and that pressure built up for years and it exploded into hip hop. Yeah. And I think San Francisco in the 80s, 90s was a similar kind of environment. Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, like we used to go to Club Townsend, and then they had this little room in the back that was on King Street, and it was just desolate. Yeah. And now it's like Tech Central, and And it wasn't, it's just like a whole part of the city that hadn't even been developed at the time. And, all that.
Yeah, that was
shit.
like no man's land. I remember that.
Yeah,
for
totally.
sure. Yeah.
And now it's a ballpark and,
Yeah.
and this commercial center and all that. And, but that, that environment, I think, means so much to shaping the culture that comes out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was on, I grew up on 23rd and Dolores and like Dolores Park. And
oh, man.
I just remember hearing like RBL Posse and, and just like, I don't know, just the whole vibe of like the local, by the time I was in high school, just like the local hip hop scene. But then at the same time, all those like luminary like 90s East Coast hip hop records were coming out, Nas and Wu-Tang and everything. It was just that, it was all just exploding like everywhere, it felt like, And now all these years later, when you look back on it, you realize how special of a time it was. But at the time it was kind of just like, oh yeah, this is just normal. Like there's literally this much quality, art and music like existing around us.
And I think when you're in it and you're young, like you think that's never going to end or change.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't get the concept of change.
Yeah.
When you're at that age, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because everything is so immediate.
Yeah, you don't have any frame of reference. You're just in it. Yeah.
What was how'd you get on the turntables?
Well, basically, like I was saying, even that early on, like 7, 8 years old, like listening to mix shows, even then I was just like, how is there no pauses in between this? And then I hadn't quite put it together yet, like what was happening. But I remember, just like every other DJ you ever hear, who heard Herbie Hancock Rocket, and they were like, how are they doing the frick fresh, frick fresh? And, basically, like, I can't really pinpoint the first time I ever like saw. I think I probably saw turntables on TV first, and then I started kind of like putting the pieces together, like hearing cuts on songs, like understanding how they were doing mix shows, and then like basically in the early to mid 90s, like I had one of my best friends, his older brother had turntables in their attic.
Okay.
They lived in like the Upper Haight.
Yeah.
And his brother was like really strict about like, don't mess with my turntables. Like nobody's allowed except, for me. And like even when he was around, you couldn't, mess with him. You had to just kind of sit in the room and he would play records on it. But from the moment I laid eyes on those turntables, that was the first turntables that like, a friend of a friend had or anything that I was like that close to that I could like see and was just like transfixed. And the memory I have of like the sort of like explosion for me of like, oh my God, this is like all I want to do is they had a house party one night and I like snuck up there, of course, got on the turntables. And by that time I had figured out how to like hit record on the tape or whatever. And I was just messing around up there and I hit record on the tape and I mixed Desmond Decker into like Tribe, like, and I was like, I had this like moment of like, this is so dope. Like I was just feeling myself. I was like, but like the recording like came off clean, like it was tight. And so it was like, it was literally like, now when I think about it, it's like Can't Hardly Wait or something. Just like, I came downstairs with the tape in hand, like, just like, yo, like, and my friend's brother, like, he was all mad at first. He was like, hey, I told you can't go up there. And I was like, but yo, listen to this. And I like put the tape in, and then he was like, oh, damn, that's really dope. And then he gave me props. And then like everyone at the party was like dancing to the tape. You know what I mean? It was like just like a classic 90s house party.
Yeah,
and
that's a good start.
Yeah, and then like that was the moment where it was like, all right, this is what I want to do. And
it was easy. So did you just jump in and start playing gigs? Like, was that easy to?
No, not at all. I mean, I basically, like, a couple years after that, I finally got my own turntables, and I still have the same techniques, 1200s, like, to this day. But they're like tanks, man.
You can't break them.
They're tanks. But mixers, on the other hand, this is a different story.
Sure.
And I had that rinky-dink Gemini mixer that everybody had back in the day. And so, with that setup at home, like I was just like, all I cared about at that point was just getting better. And like I've talked to, and actually I teach a class now at Point Blank Music School. And
cool.
It's kind of interesting because like getting to see people that are like as enthusiastic as I was back then, and I can relate to this sort of feeling of like you have these ideas in your head and you just want to get them out, but you don't have the like technical like wherewithal yet to do it, or you don't have the like muscle memory or like you know what I mean, and so you're just trying to get the like the feel down. And so like first couple of years I had turntables, like all I wanted to do was just like try to get these ideas out of my head of like certain scratches or things, or just experiment with like, blending certain kinds of records, or just, it was just like a really experimental time. And then I went to college in Oregon, and the whole time I was up there, I was just like, scratching X amount of hours a day, and just like, you just couldn't get me off the turntables. Yeah. So by the time I came back to San Francisco after school in like 2002, that's when I was just like chomping at the bit to break into the local scene. Yeah. But at that point I already had like 5 years of practice under my belt. Yeah. And I had played, a grip of like college parties and stuff. So I had experience with like, crowds, not like huge crowds or anything, but enough experience to be like, okay, I feel like I'm ready. And so I just started like going out constantly to different bars, clubs, kind of immerse myself in the scene. And then, it's just the classic story of like just kind of hanging out places and, trying to see if I could get on, but not trying to be too thirsty about it, just kind of hanging out. Yeah. And then one night, my friend, B-Cause, shout out to B-Cause, who's a legendary San Francisco DJ, was just like, yo, I got to go to the bathroom. Can you hold it down for a few minutes? And I got on, and like he came back and he was like, yo, you're killing it. And then like, let me play for a bit longer. And, then I started like DJing with him sometimes. And then, I don't know, like just kind of connecting the dots, you know what I mean? Like, but that's the advice I always tell people coming up is just like, just go hang out. Don't be trying to like make money off this. You know what I mean? Like just, if you really love it that much, like you shouldn't have any issue with that. Like as far as just, just going out and exposing yourself to the scene and different DJs and just soaking it all in. And then like, you'll probably at some point get an opportunity to like, like get put on, do something, you know what I mean? And
so, like the idea of like doing it for the love. Yeah. And as you said, you put in, 5 years before it cracked off as a job, right? Yeah. And so it's kind of a cool idea, but it's also like, I think really hard, especially when you're young and you see people coming up, you see the, the glamour from the outside of like, especially what's happening with DJs now. Yeah. How do you, like, when you're working with students at Point Blank or whatever, like, how do you justify that, putting in that kind of work when in some ways you sort of don't have to?
Well, it's like I can like talk about it until I'm blue in the face with students or try to explain it. But man, it's like so much of the time it's like you either got it or you don't kind of thing, where with regards to like, I can sort of see it in students or young folks that are coming up, that sort of like they wouldn't know what to do with themselves if they weren't just like spending all their time doing this thing. And, and that's, I can relate to that feeling of coming up, of just this almost like rabid like intensity of just like foaming at the mouth, like let me just get on these turntables, or let me just hang out and watch dope DJs. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I guess I just try to like influence as much as I can to keep it pure, to keep it that same like pure like just enthusiasm. I feel like, I don't know, I think in a way that's sort of like coming back around a little bit. People are craving a little more authenticity, I think, and we're sort of like coming out of this like insane EDM era. Sure. So I think that's complementary to like what we're talking about, like people having a authentic like enthusiasm, despite all of the like flashiness, especially in the last 10 years of of DJing, and not only that, but how broad even the term DJing or DJs has become.
Right.
It could mean so many different things at this point, you know.
Yeah. So is there a common thread? And as you said, DJing can mean so many different things, and there's different genres and styles, and whatever. Is there a common characteristic of the great DJs that you know?
I mean, the first thing that pops in my head is that same sort of like unadulterated like enthusiasm, where you couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah.
And it's just all you think about, all like you care about. It's like you couldn't live without it. Like, and I mean, I
guess you can't teach that.
You can't teach that. Yeah. You kind of. I'm teaching my 4th term so far right now, and it's cool because every term it's a different energy, it's a different group of students, and it's kind of something that I sort of wait to see if it's there. Yeah. And if I do see it and it's there, then I'm like, okay, I can do a whole lot with this person. Yeah. And then if it's not there, I try to do everything I can to foster it. But at the end of the day, you can't force it. You know what I mean? But I mean, I think that. Man, I mean, it's just, I guess it's like the whole 10,000 hour rule kind of deal, where like you can, you have to get to a point where you're hitting walls and you gotta like kind of push through them, and you gotta like be committed to a certain amount of like repetition and sort of like just getting it right. You know what I mean? So I guess, just the sort of dedication, the like, but I mean, that's hard to teach because, I don't know. I suppose I'm fortunate that I just had this sort of like, almost insane level of like, just like, this is all I want to do, like, from a young age.
You still have that?
You know what? I think I do. I think that like, it's been really interesting to see everything that's gone down, especially in the last 10 years, with just like we were just talking about, how broad the definition of DJing has become, what the perception of DJing is, for the general public. Yeah. All these changes that have gone down, the whole wave of like overnight DJs, people that do all kinds of other stuff, and then all of a sudden they're a DJ. Right. Those kind of things could definitely potentially discourage people, or make them feel like, it's not worth it. And I mean, there's certainly been bumps in the road, but I kind of like the idea of like, you're not supposed to just always, I mean, you should fundamentally love what you do, but you're not always gonna like, just be like, I love this. Like, you're gonna have obstacles, you're gonna have moments of like, you're gonna have challenges. But I guess as long as you have that fundamental kind of drive and that love for it, like, you'll get through it, and you know what I mean? I guess I have certain things that I kind of like continuously sort of go back to. If I'm ever kind of feeling like I'm getting a little lost, or I kind of need a reminder of why I do certain things, really what I kind of just go back to like records a lot of the times. I just chill out and listen to records, and I'm just like, okay, all right, this is what I love,
Are there certain records that like come to mind when you think of that?
I mean, Roy Ayers, Everybody Loves the Sunshine, or like Herbie Hancock, Headhunters album. Things that just kind of like, or even just like Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders, just like certain records that were so important for me at that critical time. Yeah. The records that I feel like sort of brought me online, so to speak, of like, oh, right. Yeah. Because when I think back to a time before discovering these particular records, and like having this feeling of like, I know what I want to do, but I don't know what it is yet, but I know there's something there. Yeah. And then certain things I heard, like the first time I heard like Electric Relaxation, like I was just like, oh yes, this is it. You know what I mean? Like, so like certain things like that, like, but then as an adult, it's like, I might go listen to like the Ronnie Foster like sample, you know what I mean? And be like, it'll give me the same kind of feeling. Yeah. Whereas I've heard Electric Relaxation like, thousands of times at this point. Yeah. So it's like, I'll kind of flip it. You know, maybe like, oh, I'll go listen to the original and it'll give me that same kind of feeling, that same kind of wave.
It's so funny you say that because I kind of go through the similar, like I forget to fall in love with music, you know, and I did that just the other day. I was like, I went and added Low End Theory to my Apple Music, and I listened to the album, you know, start to finish. I think I listened a couple times.
Nice.
And it's like, yeah, that record was everything in my life when it came out, you know, and I probably played it, whatever, 100 times. And it had been 20 years probably since I'd heard the whole album at once, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's an interesting moment to kind of spend with yourself.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love to do that.
So when you're teaching, what are the mistakes you try to steer your students away from?
Man, I feel like there's so many.
Yeah. What's a big one like that you made that stands out?
Wow, another great question. I can tell you're good at, you know what you're doing here. A mistake that I made that I try to steer them away from. Wow. I feel like you're making me realize I need to be more like self-critical. You know
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
I spend so much time thinking like, I just, you know, I'm the master here. I just know exactly what I'm doing.
That probably makes you a better teacher.
Yeah, no, I need to be more critical and humble.
No.
But yeah.
That's no fun.
Yeah, right. Yeah, what's the fun in that? A mistake that I made. Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, first thing that popped to my head is like, theory-wise, because what's interesting is like with Point Blank, the curriculum actually comes from their headquarters in London.
Right.
They give me a lot of leeway to sort of like interpret it as I see fit and kind of, you know, assess like what aspects of it apply to, you know, at any given term, like the types of students I have. But if there's one kind of theory off top that pops in my head, like, or theory-wise, that's something that, you know, right out the gate, is something I did a handful of times early on. It's like messing up the phrases and the bars of when you're beat matching. So you might have two records that are perfectly beat matched, but if you drop the one on the three of the other joint, it creates an effect where the crowd, like, it's almost like this subliminal thing where the crowd knows something's wrong, but they don't know what. Because for all intents and purposes, like, it's on beat, but something just sounds weird about it. You know what I mean?
I mean,
that's something I'm constantly correcting. I
mean, that's an interesting point, and I had, thinking about this interview, I had a question that I kind of think you sort of led us to. That's what separates a good DJ from a great DJ?
A number of things. I mean, wow, I feel like there's so many things.
Well, because, I mean, I think what you just said is a good example because, you know, if you had asked me, like, there's, you know, can you mix? Can you select right for the room? Like, are you, you know, and then, but that's like most decent DJs can do those two things, right?
Yeah.
And you should be able to deliver, although there's a lot of people and some of them making a lot of money who can't do one or both of those. But like, you know what I mean? Like, but then there's those guys that just, you know, and for me, I'm not an expert, so I just know if I'm having the time of my life or not, right? And and there's this sort of little bit of quality that I can't really explain.
Yeah, I mean, programming is like a big one for sure. Pacing. Pacing and programming over the course of a set or an entire night. I tend to think that it makes DJs way better to at least go through some portion of their career, some phase or portion of their career where they're playing much longer sets. Because they're going to have to dig for more music. They're going to have to deal with more sort of variables and situations that can come at them over the course of the night. They're going to have to kind of fine-tune their set a little more to to just work for a longer period of time. Whereas if you're just only playing hour, 2-hour sets, like for your whole career, you know, you might be lacking in the programming department. And yeah, I guess like a really great DJ, I feel like, has a good balance of reading the crowd, but then also having sort of confidence in themselves and the sort of like story they want to tell, or the kind of like, as cheesy as it may sound, like journey they want to take the crowd on. You know what I mean? Like those two things, if you can sort of strike the perfect balance between those two things, I think that takes you from being good to being great. Because if you go too far in either direction, so let's say you go too far in the direction of being a crowd pleaser, then sure, you're doing a good job, but you're just kind of like a run-of-the-mill. There's nothing exceptional about you. You know, you're just like, okay, oh, that guy, you know, just, it's predictable. You know what I mean? And then on the flip side, if you're trying to be this like ultimate tastemaker, like everyone's just got to like understand that I'm here to like, you know, put people up on game and educate. It's like, well, yeah, well, guess what? You're kind of an asshole, you know, and people are bummed. You know what I mean? But if you can kind of meet in the middle, so to me, it's like, you know, read the crowd, like feel the energy of the room and realize that you're kind of conducting that energy, but then also take risks, you know what I mean? And like, and be like, you know what, there's this one song I've been listening to at home for the last week that I'm obsessed with, and I'm just going to throw it in there and just see what happens, you know what I mean?
Can you remember early on someone kind of doing that, and like when you sort of realized that?
Yeah, I mean, because like basically, you know, the initial major influence that was that like the things that influenced me the most in the beginning were more on the side of like turntablism. It wasn't until a little bit later on when I became, you know, like a consistently working club DJ that I started to really admire a lot of, especially East Coast DJs, party rocking DJs. I remember seeing like the Rub DJs, like in the early 2000s, Cosmo Baker, absolute monster. The way watching him, like when they came to San Francisco, like for the first time, I think in like 2003, something like that. And this was right around the time that like message boards and things like that were first kind of popping off, and like it was a really cool time because I was learning about, you know, all of these DJs that were working in other cities and doing similar work that I was doing, and then it was sort of like this awareness like building of like, oh, there's all these other cats out there doing all this great stuff. And then because of like this sort of, you know, internet networking becoming sort of a new possibility, people, and then like the MySpace era came in, but everybody just kind of like networking and getting booked in other cities. And yeah, when those guys came to San Francisco and they played at Milk, I remember just being like blown away by like their programming, just like I was just talking about, the pacing and the programming, just the right balance of playing to the crowd but taking risks. And like, Cosmo was one of the first people that I saw kind of do this like particular East Coast style of like where you kind of play a phrase from one record, right? And then you go into something else that's kind of okay, let me think of a specific example. Like, okay, I saw him one time a few years after that actually, but he would do the same thing like with different records. But I saw him play the intro from Run DMC Sucker MCs like 2 years ago. A friend of mine asked me to say. So he played that, and then it's like, and it went this way, boom, and go into something else, right? And then he would play a portion of something else. Then he would go back to the Run DMC 2 years ago, and it went this way, boom, go into something else. Then go back one more time, then go into something else. To me, that was crazy. Like, and the other DJ I saw do that on the West Coast was J-Rock. I saw J-Rock had those classic mixes, Sex Machine Tonight and Live at the Sex Machine Today. And those were game changers for me. That was like around 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
He did that same thing with like children growing, winning, producing, and then go into Gaz, sing, and then go back into the, whatever. It's,
Yeah.
But that it's almost to me sort of like this ill like storytelling like within a set in a way, which to me that just programming wise like really blew my mind.
Yeah.
And up until that point, like I was saying, I was really more so influenced by like the scratch pickles and Q-Bert, and I was just like, what's that one scratch that they do? And I was just trying to teach myself how to like crab scratch and flare and then that, but then on the flip side, like the digging scene, Brain Freeze, DJ Shadow and Cut Chemist and all that, and those guys obviously incredible programmers of their sets as well. But as far as just straight up club DJing, I would say J-Rock, Cosmo, DJ Crooked, was one of the illest club DJs ever.
Right?
Yeah, basically by the late 2000s, kind of when I was like gonna make the move to LA, and I was like, I had met AM the first time, and of course he was just like insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, around that time is kind of when I first started going to like Vegas more and seeing certain DJs play out there, and I'll never forget seeing like DJ Crooked in Vegas. I think it was like 06, playing at like Jet or something like that, and just like killing it. Like that was when I was seeing a lot more, and he's from New York, you know what I mean? It was like more of this like East Coast influence of like quick mixing. Like I'm gonna play, 4 choruses from different songs in a row, but I'm gonna do it completely seamlessly, like flawlessly, and keep the energy. It's like working the crowd into like a frenzy, you know what I mean? Because everybody's singing along just that one part, but then there's no no lack of energy whatsoever. Like there's no moment where it dips down. It's just like boom, 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 just hitting them with joints like one after the other, like relentlessly. And that was an eye opener for me, because the West Coast and the Bay I feel like was so like blendy. Everything was just so like, okay, we're gonna blend these 8 parts of this, and we're gonna blend the 8 parts of this, and it was just everything's so smooth. And I liked that East Coast influence of like bam, bam, just like, just dropping records and learning how to play certain records you have to play from the top.
Right.
Not blend them. You gotta like scratch them in and just drop it, because you can't be blending everything. It's just boring.
Yeah, it's funny that, I guess I never, that all like, now that you say it, I kind of get it, and I don't know that I was paying attention while it's happening.
Yeah.
But I grew up, like, for me.
Oh, you mean you were just partying and having a good time like a normal person, and not being an insane nerd like me?
but you'd have these, I think, well, I was going to say, so, I came up in an era, like the DJs that I grew up to, or, was Pause, Mind Motion, Supreme.
Wow.
Rolo, Ivan.
Nice.
Positively Red.
Yes.
It's that San Francisco.
Yep.
I think Pause and Supreme and we went to high school together.
Wow.
So I knew those guys.
Wow.
And hung out with them and whatever. So, and you would see, and
I used to buy Supreme tapes from True.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like an amazing era of DJs.
For sure.
It definitely was a certain style that, again, like I don't think I was really conscious of it, because you're just partying and having a good time. Yeah. And I came to LA, and it was a different crop of DJs and a different, you had Beat Junkies, and you had like these different influences. So the first party I ever did, actually, I flew down DJ Pause, and it was Pause, Aladdin, and DJ Utaka, who was Ice-T's DJ at the time. And it was this crazy night.
Wow.
But like, yeah, that's a totally different style of DJing. Yeah. That, I don't think I was even aware of that.
Yeah, when I think of like Supreme tapes, like he was like I feel like there was definitely, everybody was influenced by New York, you know what I mean? And everybody was also playing a lot of East Coast like hip hop at that time. So the influence was obviously thick, and it was very present. But yeah, and it's definitely a blanket statement for me to say the entire West Coast was really blendy.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But yeah, I mean,
you have these trends.
For me personally, I think that like I sort of caught like the last, like I wasn't old enough yet to like see any of those guys live.
Yeah.
Like I remember hearing Mind Motion on the radio a ton and just being like, and just thinking to myself like, this is so dope. Like,
yeah, he's a monster.
Yeah, just absolute beast. But like, by the time I was becoming really active in the scene, like I feel like maybe, I hadn't seen as much of that era like in person, because when that was happening, I was like going to some of my first shows ever, which were way more on the side of like, like I was talking about like the turntablist stuff and like the Justice League, like, like that venue. And, so in a way, I mean, it's interesting that you bring it up, because like I would love to either hear some live mixes from the guys you mentioned from that time.
There's some Cream of Beat tapes floating around.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I would love to catch that. That would be something interesting to kind of, look up online and kind of dig around for some stuff. Because like, now that you mention it, it's interesting how much, when you tell these stories, it's coming from like personal experience, and you have this kind of framework in your mind.
Sure.
But so much of it is like, your personal history and your, your personal like.
Yeah, and our memories.
Yeah, and your memory.
Reliable sometimes.
But now that you mention all those guys, like, wow. Yeah. Like, that was a whole area of club DJing that I personally didn't really experience, that I would love to, like, kind of go back and
So how are the crowds different now?
I don't want to sound like too much of a grumpy old man, but, I mean,
the world's changed, right?
Yeah.
The crowd should be different.
I try to, like, if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's like, don't take it too seriously. Don't, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Try to see the good in people. like with requesting, for example, I will let anybody request. My one thing is like, I want people to at least have a song title, The worst is like that's all I require from a request. I'm like, you could be jabbering to me about all kinds of other stuff, and I'll ignore you until you actually name a song.
Yeah.
Then at the very least, I kind of have an idea of what you want, or like what you're looking for. But I think like that leads me to my next point, which is just that, I think that with the way that it's sort of a trickle down thing from the way that the recording industry like changed.
Yeah.
Because, when people, it's about access and the way people consume music, and now it's just like it's just everything's streaming. And I think that there became this sort of disposable like element to it, and then people started treating DJs like live iPods, like, hey, play my song.
Put a quarter in or whatever.
And, so that's why I always like kind of try to remember for myself, and also try to remind other DJs, or like, it's like what I tell my students. I'm just like, this is a different time now, and you got to take it with a grain of salt, and you got to kind of just, because a lot of times it's about the energy that you're putting out. So if you're like super grumpy and like mean, then obviously that's going to get you nowhere.
Right.
But I tend to, it might be an overly idealistic like way of looking at it, but I tend to think like, if I have good energy and I'm just kind of like putting my best foot forward and playing the best set that I can at any given time, like, I try to like think of it as like, okay, I'm keeping away at least some percentage of annoying requesters, because they're having a good enough time.
Right.
And they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is like having a good time, that I'm keeping them at bay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And then if anybody else comes up past them, then those people are just really determined. And then, if they're that determined, or drunk. If they're that determined or that drunk, it's like, all right, well, what do you want to hear?
Right.
And, one out of every, I would say 20 times, I get a request, it's actually something that like I hadn't thought of, that's like right on time. And I turn to that person, I'm like, you know what? That is a great request, and I will play that next.
That's really cool. That's funny. That you don't hear. I mean, we've heard a lot of request stories. Spider has some amazing stories.
Oh my God.
And I follow, a couple people on Facebook who post the request stories or whatever.
Yeah.
Adam 12 has some good ones.
Yeah.
But you rarely hear anyone say like, yeah, once in a while there's a decent request.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is like you got to give everybody the benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
And you got to kind of remember, how DJ culture has changed so much.
Yeah.
It's not always necessarily their fault. They don't half the time, especially depending on their age, they might not have any idea that like.
Well, that's the thing. When we're talking about, Cream of Beat or, those early parties, and it's like every 80% of the attendees were into DJ culture.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now,
Yeah.
Clubbing is mainstream, nightlife is mainstream.
Right.
People are at Vegas for the weekend. This might be their first time they've ever been at a club.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And it's just a whole different experience.
Yeah, for sure.
What was, I know you're a 3-style champion. Is that a game changer? Like what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't end up, I've seen it completely change people's lives that like a few years later, like from when I did it.
Yeah.
Because it had exploded into kind of a much bigger thing. I mean, I won the LA one in 2010 and like it was still, it was nowhere near the kind of reach that it has now.
Yeah.
So I've seen it, completely change people's careers that ended up becoming like, world champions or US champions. And, I mean, certainly like it was a amazing feeling and I worked really hard on it. So I was really stoked.
Let me ask it this way. Is there one, if you look back at your career, has there been one game changer that things were different after than they were before?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one, but like, honestly, to this day, just packing up everything I own in a U-Haul and moving to LA just like on a whim of kind of like, let me ride this wave because at that time it was like literally, I had, like AM had started coming to San Francisco more and I was opening for him like almost every time that he would come up and developed a friendship with him and, his people were kind of like, just come to LA, just make it happen. And, I mean, that when I look back on as far as like risk taking and just being like, let's do this thing, that was kind of the biggest moment still to this day of like, here goes nothing, you know what I mean? Like, let's see how this goes and just going for it, because jumping into that, much bigger pond and, I think just immediately put the right kinds of pressure on me to just step up my game and just like do better. And kind of like, to stick out more in a good way, to like make people remember me more and like, just the right kind of pressure.
That's such an interesting statement, the right kind of pressure, because I think we have this like, I think the old school thinking is like, all pressure is good pressure. People work, they thrive under pressure, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And then, this sort of new era is like happiness. We should all be happy at all times and, we should find balance and all that. And so, both of those are kind of extreme positions.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
What's the right, we good?
Yeah, okay.
What's the right kind of pressure for you? Or I mean, you sort of describe it, right? I get it. It's but can you recognize that as it's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mention it because I was literally just thinking about that. Like, I'm a terrible procrastinator.
Okay.
So like, I need sometimes to just like, fill up my calendar with all kinds of things and just agree to as many things as possible just so that I'll talk about the right kind of pressure, so that it's like I'll just keep my calendar out
So you, like,
at
get shit
home.
done.
So like I'll just throughout the day, if I feel like I'm lagging at any point, I'll just look at the calendar and be like,
Right.
like, don't forget all this stuff you got to do, and just
No, I
and then
get
and then I'll just be like, okay, like, all right, like, and it's funny, like I always think back to this one random thing, like in the liner notes of Jay Dilla, Welcome to Detroit. He has this part where he's talking about being super unmotivated to work on music, and being like, he's like, because there's in the liner notes for that album, he talks about each song and like what went into each song. And I forget which track it is, but it always stuck with me for some reason. This thing where he says, I didn't feel like working on music. He's like, but I sat there and thought about all the people that are working on music right now. And I was like, well, someone else is going to make it before I make it, so I better get to work.
Yeah.
And I remember it really had this impression on me at the time of like, this is Dilla, like just like the absolute like top level like genius master of beat making, and like nobody could ever touch this dude. Like he's just in his own lane. And to hear that he would go through that struggle really had this impression on me of like, it goes back to what we were talking about before of like, everyone has to come to that moment of like, where you don't feel like doing the thing that you've wanted to do your whole life.
Sure. Yeah.
Everyone has those days, and it's like, it's something I definitely have wrestled with over time, and as the older I get, I feel like the more I really try to like stay, more disciplined and aware about trying to create the right situations and things in my life that will maximize, the productivity. Like,
So for him, I mean, that statement, it sounds like there's a competitive drive for him.
yeah,
Right, that he doesn't want someone else to get whatever he's right, which is, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
Is it the same thing for you, or what's the thing that gets
No.
you motivated?
No, because I think that reading that, just what I took away from it more so than the competition aspect was just the aspect of like just being amazed that this guy, like I had this idea in my mind of him or anyone else I really looked up to as just being like just blissful like 100% of the time, like because they're living their dream and they're doing what they want to do and they're just always happy, and like when you're younger you just don't even, it would never even cross your mind that someone you look up to that much would ever, not want to do what they do, And then you get a little older and maybe you have a certain amount of success and you're like, whoa, wait, I totally get it, So, some people I think are driven a lot more by competition. I don't know. I feel like I'm driven by like, I don't know, just like wanting to kick my own ass, I guess. And like, I've noticed that as I get older too, it's like I kind of, each day it's just this sort of thing of like, what would make me the most stoked right now? It's like, what would make me the most stoked right now? Just like getting a bunch of shit done and like making a new beat or like listening to some cool tunes or like whatever it is. And like,
that's cool.
Sure, along the way there's like moments of kind of spacing out, like, oh wait, I just listened to this random Steely Dan album. Like, what part of the plan was that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So because it's like all in the realm of like artistic whatever, like creativity and like obviously it's like the blessing and curse like element to that of like lack of structure versus like learning how to create your own structure. You know what I mean? It's like, so I don't really think I'm driven by competition as much as like like knowing that like, I think what I took away from that Dilla thing and other things I've read from other people I look up to over the years that are kind of along the same lines is sort of like you're your own worst enemy, like with the whole aspect of like you got to get out of your own way. And sometimes it's like you finish certain kinds of work and you'll be like, man, why was I like, struggling with that so hard? Like now that it's done, it's awesome and it's great and it seems so simple and easy, and yet I had to go through this like crazy internal struggle just to like, get it done.
Of course.
So it's like wrestling with yourself. That whole
thing. Absolutely. All right, I got to do a lightning round before they throw us out of here. So complete this sentence for yourself.
Okay.
I don't have talent. I have blank.
Insanity?
Okay. I'll take that one.
Yeah.
If I worked for you, what's something I would hear you say over and over?
Don't be a dick.
That's a nice tip. Yeah, that's worth saying.
Like, be nice to people?
Yeah. What about for your students? Is there like if I asked your students, what is
Stick with it.
Yeah.
Like be prepared to get discouraged, but then fight through those, push through that wall, because there's going to be a lot of walls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I literally just yesterday, I'm on week 2 of like the new term, and like this crop of students is a lot more talented than I had anticipated. The most talented crop of students I've had thus far.
Really?
But it's great because then it forces me to come up with new challenges for them.
Yeah.
And so I had them blindly beat matching yesterday. Like, they're used to like CDJs and seeing the BPM.
Right. Yeah.
I covered up the BPM with like index cards.
Yeah.
And then I had them like mixing on vinyl too, and they were just like, this is so hard. And I was just like, yes.
Yeah.
But they stuck with it and
That's
they
cool.
pushed through it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to foster, this environment of like, be prepared to hit a wall, because I'm not gonna I'm not gonna be halfway with the amount I'm gonna challenge you.
Right.
But if you can push through that wall even when you get frustrated, then you're gonna get somewhere with it. It's like what we were just talking about, like trying to hold that same standard for yourself.
Yeah, sure.
It's so difficult sometimes.
Of course.
But that's what
Who
it's all
would you
about.
be most excited to learn as a fan of your work?
Madlib.
So,
That's the easy one.
what's your favorite city to travel to?
Not to be boring or anything, but New York, pretty much.
It's a dope city. Maybe not right now. Maybe not this week, but
Yeah, right.
Nah, it's a great city.
I just always if I haven't been in a while, I just start to crave it. I'm like, I gotta get back there.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a ton of places I still haven't been that I'm dying to get to, but
What's
But-
top of the list?
top of the list right now has got to be Japan, Tokyo. I still have never been. I'm trying to get there this year. I'm working on some things right now.
I got a guy you should talk to.
Oh, cool.
He messes with DJs out there.
Awesome.
Dope. Yeah.
Right on.
What's the last great book you read? Is there a book that's had like a big impact on you over the years?
Yeah. I mean, I like David Byrne's book on music.
Oh, How Music Works?
Yeah. How
that's
Music
great.
Works is awessome. I haven't finished that yet.
It's a
I'm
big
like
book.
halfway through it. That one's awesome. Those 33 and a third books. The Donuts one is incredible.
Cool.
The Paul's Boutique one is incredible. I just got the Portishead one, the one on Dummy.
Nice.
I haven't cracked that yet, but I'm stoked to get into that soon.
Yeah.
What else?
Those are fun.
Yeah. My mom got me the Patti Smith's book for Christmas. I think it's called Just Kids or something like that, about her and Robert Mapplethorpe.
Yeah.
That one looks great. I read like the first couple chapters of that when I was home to be polite, so I could say, "Hey, Mom, I started reading that book you got me."
No, I'm sure that's
but,
good.
But I really like books like that where it's like I don't necessarily know a whole lot about that person's music, or I'm not necessarily a huge fan of their music, but reading it makes me want to learn more about their music and listen to more of their music. But it's also dope to kind of like get inside their head and see what kind of like what informed their creative approach to what they did, because you always end up kind of taking something away from it for what you do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Totally.
there's always something there that kind of influences you or kind of like gives you like some inspiration.
Did you read, this doesn't fall into that category because I think we're both big fans, but did you read the Herbie Hancock book?
No, but
It's a game changer.
so
good.
Yeah, wow.
So good.
Okay, and that's like an autobiography?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a few years old.
Nice.
It's amazing.
It's funny you mentioned that, because that's on my list, and I still have never read Miles Davis's autobiography either.
Me neither, but that's on my list.
Yeah, but people have always told me you got to read that.
Yeah, he has a great Miles story.
Oh, nice.
Like, you got to read it.
Cool. Yeah, I saw Don Cheadle's Miles Davis movie on a plane.
Yeah.
And it was all right. Yeah. but it was dope, like, as far as just, like, it had some really dope moments, and, like, you know, they had Robert Glasper on the soundtrack, and he killed it.
Cool.
You know, I listened to the soundtrack when I got home.
Yeah.
And it was really dope. And
that's cool.
It reminded me I got to read that. And it reminded me of Herbie as well.
What movie have you seen the most in your life?
Probably like Half-Baked, Dazed and Confused, Billy Madison, like dumb shit.
Dude, Adam Sandler is a force.
And then, yeah, Goodfellas. I just always come back to, like, kind of the most predictable Goodfellas, Godfather 1 and 2.
It's amazing movies.
I just rewatched all of The Sopranos.
Oh, yeah? It's a good idea.
I just kind of, like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I got in
worth
this
watching,
zone where, like, I just, over the holidays, where I was like, I haven't watched, like, I saw that they aired the pilot, and I was like, I haven't watched this in a while. And as soon as I watched the pilot, I was like, well, I guess I got to just watch out the entire thing now.
Have you heard, do you know Spider's Ray Liotta story?
No.
Oh, it's on our show. You got to listen to that.
Okay.
I'll send you the link.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Or ask him about it. It's incredible.
Wow. Man, he's got so many good ones.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite DJ?
J-Rock. Still to this day.
Yeah.
The guy is just on another level.
Yeah.
Insane. Best, just, like, career, like, track record, like, I mean.
Somebody brought his name up recently. I can't remember.
Yeah, anytime to this day I can catch a J-Rock set, I'm hyped. Because there's always something I take away from it of, like, whoa, like, either some insane tracks he's playing that I've never heard before, or, like, some kind of technique he was, like, flossing, just something, you know what I mean? It's always really inspirational, for sure.
How does everyone find you online if they want to catch a set or
everything
whatever?
Is just, like, at DJ Morse Code. So, like, Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud, you name it, at DJ MORSECODE. That's the one.
Dope. Man, thanks for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Thank
talking
you.
to you.
Yeah, this is great.
Come
fun.
back anytime, promote stuff. And,
Thank you.
That was Morse Code on Rebel Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Make sure you hit us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on iTunes. Hit us everywhere and come back next week for more Rebel Radio. Peace.